Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is the Freedom Rides, and we're fortunate to have with us a participant in the Freedom Rides in 1961, Mr. Matthew Walker, Jr. And of course, Mr. Matthew Walker, Jr., let me welcome you to the show this morning.
Thank you, Dr. Haney, and thank you for this opportunity to talk about the Freedom Rides.
And thank you for the privilege of being able to talk to a participant in the Freedom Rides. As a matter of fact, Mr. Walker, I think we might say that a large number of people might not really have any real idea of what we're talking about when we talk about the Freedom Rides and sit-ins and whatnot, and the courage that it took for individuals like yourself and others to become a part of this. Let's start off, Mr. Walker, by having you to talk about your background, your education, and a little information, and some of the things that eventually motivated you to become involved in this sit-in movement, and then we'll talk about the Freedom Rides, and during our second segment we'll give you an opportunity to give a full explanation of the rides. But first, let's talk about you and your background and motives, and etc.
Well, Dr. Haney, I guess if we're talking about my background, I can mention the fact that I was fortunate to be born into a family where there was never any want for food, clothing, or shelter. I had very loving parents, and they saw to it that we were raised well and raised in an atmosphere of love, and with what I believe to be a very good set of family values. Being a member of a family where, as I said, there was a lack of want, so to speak, I realized at an early age that it didn't make any difference as to where or whatever circumstances you may have been born into. As far as the larger society was concerned, you were still thoroughly a inferior person because of the mores of the time. I've been educated to some extent. Several colleges I've gone to, and right now I work professionally in construction. I install air conditioning systems in commercial new construction. I became interested in the civil rights movement, as it's called, largely because my parents sent me to a Catholic high school here in Nashville, where I attended this school for the second year that it was integrated, which was 1955. And the racial polarity which I experienced there sensitized me to the issue of race and how things operated in this country. So when the sit-in movement, civil rights movement came along, I was more or less attuned to what people were talking about trying to do. But let me take this opportunity to clarify one thing. We often talk about the civil rights movement, and I just want to make the point that I believe the civil rights movement is a misnomer, because I believe that our civil rights were gained as a result of the Civil War and the subsequent amendments to the Constitution, which changed our status from slave to citizen. I believe that the more accurate terminology for what happened in the 60s and subsequent years would be a human rights movement, because the question of human rights is more fundamental than civil rights. We're talking about the indecency of segregation, the indecency of being treated as an inferior being. So I'd just like to say that to put a bit of a finer point on it, the better term, I believe, would be human rights
Struggle
movement.
for human rights.
Struggle for human rights,
civil rights,
rather than civil rights, and because human rights is something more fundamental and something which is less arguable as far as that to which all people are naturally entitled.
And of course, being involved in that movement of the 1960s, generally referred to as the Civil Rights Movement, not only did you have an opportunity to see quite a bit of diversity from the point of view of having individuals that you had never worked with before, white people, for example,
yes,
you've never worked with before, that would give you an expanded understanding and an expanded opportunity in terms of seeing it as you now see it as human rights.
Yes, yes, of course. There was considerable diversity in those days, and there have always been, throughout the experience of blacks in this country, well-meaning whites, and they have always played a significant role, even before the Civil Rights Movement. Well-meaning whites were, to a large degree, the reason for the success of the Underground Railroad, for example.
And of course, let me interrupt here, Mr. Walker, for our first commercial break, after which we'll come back, and we'll be back with you following our very, very short commercial break. The topic today